So I'm delighted to welcome you all here for this lunchtime webinar, courtesy of one of the projects that I co-run, which is the Transport and Health Integrated Research Network, or THINK as we've called it. Normally Amy Nicholas runs these, but sadly she's left THINK, but I still see she's here right now. So you can never quite leave THINK. You can check out, but you can never leave. So part of the reason that Amy has left is that the funding for the first part of THINK has come to an end, but we are going to try and keep the network going because these kind of events have been just really successful. And I think the project as a whole has just been really nice to bring people together from all different types of sectors, all different types of discipline, and all different types of background. So I'm Charles Massoy. As I said, I'm the co-director of THINK. My background is psychology, albeit sort of more community environmental psychology. And I have applied that over time to transport. And I work with a lot of health practitioners. And that's where we came up with the idea that THINK needs to create a space to bring people together on that front. So what we've tried to do with THINK is keep things really organic, if you like, and that network members can bring their own suggestions of topics that they want, that we've worked very closely with our network, which now is around 200 organizations and groups, and engage with those organizations to really shape how the project goes forwards and how, which bits to concentrate on. One bit that has really come out from the work we've done before is what we're concentrating on today, and that's really, in the broadest sense, much more involvement of people in the decision making around transport and the relationship of other sectors to transport, so the built environment and architecture, urban design and things. But really it's come out from all different angles that there's got to be better involvement of people in the system somewhere. We don't do that very well. Transport's very much done to people rather than with people. So I'm delighted to have today with us both Margarida and Elke. Margarida from UWE in Bristol, where I used to work a few years back, and Elke from Mobiel 21. Both experts really in public involvement, citizen science, science communication type work. So we're delighted to have those excellent speakers with us today, who's going to present for us going forwards. So just a reminder for everyone, keep your microphones off. We're recording this, so keep your cameras off if you don't want to be revealed on the recording afterwards. What we'll do is we'll have 15 minutes or so from each speaker, and then some questions and discussion if we've as much time as we've got at the end. Put your questions in the chat if you want, or raise your hand at the end, and I'll try and do my best to get involvement and questions from everybody as we go forward. Does that all sound like a plan? Have I done that right? I think so. If so, then very much over to, I think, Margarida, you're starting, aren't you? So over to you to start and introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you, Charles. Just bear with me 1 second while I share my slides. Okay, that should be on your screens now. Just to let you know, I have 2 screens, so I will be swapping from one to the other. But hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As Charles said, I'm Margarida Sardo, and I work at the University of the West of England in Bristol. My background is actually in environmental toxicology, but I've been working in the field of science communication and public engagement for the past 15 years. And today I'll be talking about the WeCount project, which is a recent citizen science project that we did, that actually I worked with Elke on. And I'll be discussing with you how we worked on making it a bit more participatory. WeCount was a citizen science project. As I said, it was funded by Horizon 2020. It ran from 2019 until 2021, so it wasn't a very long project. And at its core, WeCount aimed to empower citizens to take a leading role in the production of data, evidence, and also knowledge around mobility in their own neighborhoods and at street level. WeCount was designed before the pandemic and started just before the pandemic started. So it started in December 2019. And by February 2020, that was when we started thinking about our recruitment and recruiting citizens. And as we all know, that was when the pandemic started. Our original plans were heavily based on face-to-face recruitment and engagement. It goes without saying that the pandemic hugely disrupted these plans, and the project ended up running largely online with only a handful of in-person activities. So how did we do WeCount? In WeCount, each citizen scientist was given a low-cost traffic counting sensor, which is called a TELRAM, and you can see one of a TELRAM here on the screen at the moment. And TELRAM, correct me if I'm wrong, Elke, but TELRAM means abacus in Dutch, so it's about counting.
Yes.
So our citizens, excuse me, our citizens mounted the TELRAM on a window in their homes, and that window had to face a road. So you had to have a clear view of the road. And this sensor, the way the TELRAM works is that automatically counts traffic, and it can also differentiate between cars, large vehicles such as vans, for example, and even bicycles and pedestrians. Through a dedicated online platform, our participant citizens could access detailed data on traffic on their roads, but also in their neighborhoods. And they could even see the speed that each vehicle was traveling. So this is the kind of data that our citizen scientists were able to collect and access. And our citizens were involved in several stages of the project, such as they were collecting traffic data, they were also analyzing that traffic data, and throughout the process, they were engaging with key stakeholders. Just to give you an overview of the scale of WeCount, because it was funded by Horizon 2020, WeCount excuse me, was an European project, international, and it involved 5 case studies across Europe. This was Leuven in Belgium, where Elke is based, Madrid and Barcelona in Spain, Ljubljana in Slovenia, Dublin in Ireland, and Cardiff in the UK. Until recently, most research involving citizen science used citizens as contributors, for instance, data gatherers, to researcher-led processes rather than co-creators. However, a recent political turn in citizen science, driven in part by the need to accelerate sustainability transitions, means that projects are now moving from a productivity view to a more democratic view. And this democratic view is a lot more centered in citizen empowerment and also policy change for adaptive resource management and governance. And in WeCount, we made a huge effort in moving on this engagement spectrum. WeCount citizen scientists had a leading role on quantifying local road traffic, via collecting data via the TELRAM, but also producing new knowledge on local mobility and co-create, and this is quite key, this was quite key, co-create informed solutions to tackle the various urban mobility challenges that were very specific to their street, to their neighborhood. As part of WeCount, and this was my main role in WeCount, we ran a full project evaluation, and the findings I'm about to present come from that evaluation. This is just a brief overview of the kind of evaluation tools that we used within WeCount, but they are not important to what I'm going to say. So in total, we had almost 2,000 citizens engaging across Europe, directly and indirectly in WeCount. This was over the 2 years. And these 2,000 citizens include 368 who hosted a TELRAM census, so 368 citizens that were actively counting traffic. Just to give you a brief idea of the demographics, the largest group of citizens was aged 35 to 49 years old, although a significant number was under 16 years old, and this was due to the efforts to reach out to children living in areas of low socioeconomic status. A quarter, 25% of the TELRUMs were installed in neighborhoods of low socioeconomic status, and around 9% of our participants were from low socioeconomic groups. However, I must say, without wanting to sugarcoating it, most of the WeCount citizens, our WeCount citizens, were highly educated, with 81% having at least the first degree. And many of our citizens told us that they were either active campaigners on sustainable mobility, or that they were really interested in being part of a research project and making a difference. So in a way, there was a section of our citizens that were from a least targeted demographic, but mostly we were preaching to the converted. WeCount succeeded in several aspects of participation. Citizens were able to name and frame a problem that they wanted addressed, or a goal to be reached that was very relevant to their lives. For instance, focusing on a specific place-based issue. For example, traffic near a school is really bad. Citizens also came together to set up the census, to analyze the data collectively, and to reflect on ways to improve advocacy for behavioral and policy change. And finally, our citizens were able to fit in via our surveys and interviews. They were able to tell us about their experiences and their thoughts on how to improve both the census and the project. And actually, after the project finished, the company that originally developed the TELRUM have come up with a 2.0 version of the TELRUM sensor based on our evaluation and based on the feedback we collected from our citizens. Based on this typology of what I just said in terms of our successes in terms of participation, WeCount can be considered as an empowering / democratic approach to citizen science. Yet, there are two flaws in the design that became apparent during the project, which throw some caution to this designation. First, as mentioned, it goes without saying, the predominance of well-educated individuals with specific interests in sustainable mobility needs to be taken into account. And second, while the project sought to empower citizens from the start, there were not opportunities for them to co-evaluate the project. So the evaluation was completely project team led. Nor was it possible for them to always come up with issues to solve as a collective. This was the result of restrictions related to the pandemic that could potentially be overcome by running in-person workshops at carefully selected venues such as community centers. Drawing on our experience in WeCount, we can argue that citizens could be involved in the evaluation from the onset of the project. So not just involved in the project and data collection and data analysis, but also involved in the evaluation from the onset. As they are recruited to take part of the project, they can be, for instance, asked to identify evaluation goals. How successful can the project be measured? And collaboratively, we could choose methods and design evaluation questions with our citizens. This project could, for instance, be initiated online using interactive boards such as Padlet, and then progress to in-person discussions and focus groups. We believe this would have been key to an even larger success in WeCount, but sadly, due to the pandemic-related restrictions, we couldn't. Furthermore, the use of participatory evaluation methodologies in citizen science has the potential to greatly contribute to impact assessment, and impact is so important these days in research projects, as well as empower participants and build capacity. However, and this is, I would like to stress this point, it is really important to acknowledge that for some projects, they will simply lack the capacity and the resources to employ participatory methodologies. Participatory evaluation is very time consuming. Any evaluation is very time consuming, but particularly so participatory evaluation, and it tends to result in high volumes of data, another challenge to then manage. Therefore, we would say that participatory evaluation could prove too much, both for citizens and the project team, if the right project is not available. So, in conclusion, we would say that the citizens' input to the design of the sensor and the project workshops resulted in a citizen science model for urban mobility that could easily be adapted and used in other cultures and contexts. However, citizen science projects would benefit from involving citizens in the evaluation process from the onset. For example, identifying priorities and evaluation questions collaboratively. Citizen science projects, and this is really a key point, would also benefit from financially compensating citizen evaluators and community champions who can amplify the voice of underrepresented groups. I think we take for granted that people are so keen to take part in our projects that sometimes we forget that they are using their own time, they are using their spare time to effectively work with us on our projects, and they bring immense value. I think that's all for today from my side. Over to Elke. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'll start sharing my screen. And bear with me, I also have to just make it right for you. Oh. And it's not moving like it should, but okay. You're seeing my screen, right?
Yes, we can see it, Elke.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And you see the full screen, okay?
Not yet.
Okay. Where can I change it? Okay. Can I change it? Can I change it? Okay, I think we have to do it like this because I cannot change it, but I think it's big enough, right?
It's big enough. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So I wanted to talk you about, sorry, I clicked already too fast, how to make mobility data the talk of the town, and tell you about the citizen science approach behind this, how you can make mobility data the talk of the town. But first of all, a very short introduction into Mobiel 21. Mobiel 21 is an NGO based in Leuven, and we work together with Margarida from UWE in the WeCount project. We have been existing quite some time already, and these are the 4 topics, as you see on my screen, that we work for or work with. It's mobility for all is very important for us. We fight together against transport poverty. The car-free life we like to focus on more streets on a human scale, as we like to call it, but also these smart communities, and there's engagement and participation coming in. We want to give the tools to local municipalities, all kinds of municipalities and governments for participation, innovation for a sustainable future. And the Safe to School theme is really important for us. We want to create healthy and child-friendly school environments. Those are the things that we like to work on. And how do we do this? Well, this is our DNA. We like to work with an inclusive vision, with the vulnerable groups, and especially focusing on the non-usual suspects, so also including them. And in this way, we would like to be somewhere in between the bottom-up and the bottom-up and top-down approach by empowering citizens in working together with the policymakers and also assisting policymakers in working together with the citizens. And in this way, there in between this top-down and bottom-up approach, we see the citizen science as the perfect tool to do this, or the perfect approach, not a tool, to do this. And why citizen science? Why do we think that citizen science can do this in this going in between this top-down and bottom-up approach? Well, we think that citizen science sees or makes it possible to see everyone as a mobility expert, because everyone is a mobility expert. Everyone is moving around, everyone lives somewhere, so everyone has his or her specific expertise on mobility. And this citizen science approach in mobility research makes it possible to actively participate in mobility research and not as just collecting data, as Margarida said, just more like a democratic view, as act as the real researchers involved in all the steps of the way. It has a lot of important advantages as we see it. You can develop as a policymaker the supported strategies and policies because you have been involving your local experts on mobility and including their expertise and visions. And it makes you possible, or makes you be able to move more forward into this sustainable mobility objective that you have. But what is citizen science? Margarida has been talking about citizen science also. And you can find a lot of information of citizen science on the internet, of course. There is this general definition of the Citizen Science Association, which says that it's an overarching description of the different ways in which the public participates in science, which doesn't say a lot, in my opinion. So we have been thinking about Mobiel 21, what we see as sound methods for the good citizen science approach, based on what we have been learned, or what we've learned, in the WeCount project. The basis of all of this, what I'm presenting, is this WeCount project, as we learned a lot thanks to what we have been doing there and thanks to what we have been able to evaluate and the results. But science methods for citizen science, we think it's really important that, as I said before, recognize your local citizens or your citizens as the mobility experts as they are. Build a community, work together with a community of citizens to collect this objective data all together. And also, as Margarida told you already, analyze the data together, because you can gain these optimal insights in this data, in this mobility data, because you can include all the different expertises and views of the citizens on this mobility data. Also very important, and Margarida already told you, design the solution or think about the solutions together with the citizens. It's not only about this collecting data, analyzing data, but based on all this data and the analysis, also build together with the citizens on the solutions. It's also really important that you test and test the solutions that you have been developing, and again, evaluate it. So what is the impact? What is the vision of the opinion of the citizens on these tests? And then after this test, you can implement it, of course. And what we also think that's really important, and we learned also in the WeCount project, is keep the conversation going. Keep on talking about the data that you're collecting, about things that you're doing, and especially very locally and on the streets, definitely, where it's all about, but also online. Give the opportunity for the people to keep the conversation going in all kinds of ways. And what I wanted to tell you more about is also that this data, really important in a citizen science project, recognize the expertise of the citizens in this data collection and this data analysis, but also make clear for yourself that data reveals more than you think. There is a lot of storytelling that you can do with this data that you are collecting. And to make it clear for you what I mean with this is, I show you a number, some figures here. It's something that comes from Belgium, and here it says, every day in Belgium, 14 children are involved in a road crash while going to school. There it says this number, 14, but it's not just a number. Behind this number, there are these faces. These 14 children that you see there, those are the faces behind this number. So that's also really important to take that into account, that there's more than just numbers behind data. It also has a story behind that. Again, this sentence, every day in Belgium, 14 children are involved in a road crash while going to school. But there's always a different story behind this number 14. It's all different things, different stories that you need to take into account when you talk about this number, the data. So data is just more than just numbers. It's also a whole story behind it. And please take this always into account. Now, talking about the citizen science and the importance of data in it, but how do you do a citizen science project? Well, within this WeCount project, we developed a framework together, but what is really important is engagement is key. This is also the topic of the webinar, of course, but think about how to engage or how to engage the citizens and what role you could give to whom. Not everyone is happy when you ask them to collect data or to analyze data. Someone maybe wants to just give technical support or develop some communicative material or organize some actions or think about the solutions. So it's not that everyone needs to be involved in all the steps of the way, but engagement is still key, and think about all the different roles that you can give to the citizens in the citizen science projects. And now I will show you just shortly this framework that has been designed in the WeCount project and has been used and has been tested in the different living labs in the WeCount project. It has been extended also with more steps than these 5 steps that we have, that I show you here. But it gives you an idea on the steps that you need to take and how to include in every step of the way the citizens in your citizen science projects. If you want to know more, all can be found on Zenodo still, I think. If you want to learn about all the tools that are behind all of the steps of this citizen science framework. Now I want to just give you some examples of good citizen science projects or tools. And the first one I show you, Margarida has already talked about Telram. This is the new logo of Telram, based on what we have learned in WeCount. Telram has adapted his sensor because there were some issues with the first sensor. So they have developed a new sensor that can still be installed on a window, still collects traffic data or mobility data of all kinds of modes, now even more modes. So you can even count cargo bikes, and there's also difference between a van and a heavy truck, for example. So there are different modes that are still counting or are counting, but all the rest remains the same. It's also easier to connect. You don't have to have the Wi-Fi because that was some technical stuff that was difficult. Easier to install. It's still a citizen science service provider, so it's not only the sensor that you get from Telram, it's also the platform that Margarida has talked about, that you can see all data from everyone who is having a Telram installed in his window, so you can check all the traffic data all over Europe. And this is already an old number, but the number of Telrams are growing over the whole world, so more and more people are installing a Telram. What has been developed or has been done after the WeCount project is that we should indeed keep the conversation going. So there has been a platform developed on this Telram, which is called Telram Talks, and where people can go to and learn from each other, get inspired by each other on how they have been working with the Telram data, what they have been doing to motivate their local municipality to change something. So this is really an online way of communicating about Telram and mobility data, and people are inspiring each other over there. What has been developed in the WeCount project also is an educational package for schools that want to work with this Telram traffic mobility data. We have been, we were very happy that it has been developed in this WeCount project. That's Mobiel 21. We jumped on it because we really loved it. Because at Mobiel 21, we want to focus on work on this safe and child-friendly school environments. And in this working on the safe and child-friendly school environments, we think it's really important to include the child perspective in this. And see and learn from the child perspective on this safe and school and healthy school environments. So we developed further on what has been developed in the WeCount projects, and we developed a full package which is called Schools Count. referring to the counting system, of course, of a telegram sensor. And the first thing there is that we install the telegram network in and around the school. We're talking about primary school, so up to the age of 12 it is in Belgium. And we install around 6 to 8 telegram sensors that collect this objective telegram data in and around the school environments, or the school, in the school environments. We also developed, based on what has been developed in the WeCount projects, these school packages, this educational material that the teacher is ready to use for the teacher in the class, to make people or to children not only dive into or make it possible to dive into this telegram and mobility data, but also make the link with climate change, but also make the link with air quality, noise pollution, and things like this. So they dive into, they get a lot of insights, they learn a lot, and then what they have been learning and diving into the mobility data, we set up, or we give a guidance for the teacher to have this design workshop. So the children, based on what they have learned in these educational materials, they are triggered to identify the challenges and also to think about how they see or would like to have their school environments to be developed in the future. To go to the fourth step, which we call the playground talks. In this, the children present to the adults involved, which are the teachers, the parents, the municipality or the city, the police, the neighbors of the school. They present what they think how the school environment should look like to be more safe, more pleasant, more sustainable. And that is the basis for a participation workshop where the adults think about, okay, this is what the children have learned. This is how they see that the perfect school environment. What can we do? What is the solutions that we can develop to make this better? And then, of course, test and evaluate all these measures. This is also a citizen science approach, but focusing on this childhood perspective, because you collect data together, you co-design how you're going to collect the data, because they are doing also other data collection tools, etc. You develop together the solutions with the children, so it's really a citizen science approach. Here are some strengths of the School Scout approach, but I've been talking quite a long time, so I will go further. This is another example of a citizen science tool that we have been using quite a lot, and it's focusing really on cycling. So just a part of mobility and transport, but it's focusing really on cycling. And the idea is here that, again, you see the cyclists as the experts as they are, as a local government. So cities and towns across Europe are investing quite a lot in cycling infrastructure, in communication campaigns, because they really want to have more cyclists on board. Build it and they will come. But how do cyclists, or what do cyclists really think about all the investments that has been done? Do they really feel safer? Do they really think it's pleasant? Do they take the route that you planned to have them taking? Are there still some bottlenecks that you didn't find out and you want to take into account to make it even better? And what are the most dangerous spots? So how to collect this, how to know this. You can do this in a long evaluation process or participation process, but you really want to learn from the cyclists themselves. Do they really feel safe? Do the people think it's safe to cycle here, and how do they want to change it? So who knows the answer on this? Of course, your cyclists, your experts, your local experts. So ask it to the cyclists. They have the personal experience in this everyday cycling or almost everyday cycling. So please ask the cyclists, and Ping, which I'm talking about, gives you the opportunity to collect all this data. So it's a combination of an application and a Bluetooth button that you put on your steering wheel. So it collects route data, which is also about speeds and waiting times and which route that you use. And this Ping button, it collects data, because when a cyclist is cycling, and he or she feels something or encounters something that he doesn't like, then he can push the button. And it can be about infrastructure. It can be about a conflict. It can be about a feeling of unsafety, like for example, a car is passing by too close. Then the cyclist just push the button, and this button sends a signal to the application, and it's pinpointed on a map. And afterwards, you as a cyclist can indicate on that map, I feel unsafe, or I felt unsafe on that specific spot because of this category. So we have a list of 64 categories, and the cyclist can indicate it on that way. So it's all kinds of issues, not only infrastructural, but also not only objective, but maybe also some subjective feeling of unsafety. So it's all, the cyclists all just needs this ping button and this application on the smartphone. The thing is that all this data is, of course, collected all together and also on a map, and you can analyze this data also together with the cyclists and use their expertise on seeing, well, this is really a hot spot, this needs to be changed, but how should it need to change? Then you can ask and analyze it and think about a possible solution also together with the cyclists. That is the idea. So I want to show you some examples of, or I have shown you examples which are really technical tools that you can use to work in a citizen science approach. But there are, of course, also very analogy data visualization things or data collection things that you can use. It doesn't have to be always that high level or technical. I have a video here, but I won't show it because otherwise it will take too long. But it's about data visualization and the strength of data visualization in the public space. I can share this link in the chat afterwards, so you can have a look over there. It has English, it's spoken in Dutch, but has English subtitles, so you should be able to understand. But I will just give you some inspiration. The idea is here that in every step of the way, so in the 5 steps of the citizen science framework, you can use this. So you can use these tools, a very low threshold, to, for example, get a better idea on what is the mobility issue that you want to tackle together with the citizens. For example, use a map and let people indicate on the hot spots or the difficult spots or the spots that I really like. And if you have this big map in the street or in the public space and people are putting stickers on it, then it's really a conversation starter. So people are seeing this and going over there or coming over there and have a conversation with you. Yeah, I agree, or no, I don't agree. I like it there better, etc., etc. So you can use this as a first step also. But you can also use this in really collecting extra data, as asking at a school, for example, how did you come to the school? Did you use the bike, or you pedestrian? Did you use the car? Collecting extra data, also very possible, very low threshold, very easy to use to collect extra data. It can also be used to present the solutions that you have developed and ask the opinion of the people in the streets, in the public space where it's all about. Present it on a map, present it in a picture, present it in a graph, and then ask, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you do it different? And keep the conversation going by using this very low thresholds and non-techie examples. So these are examples, just pictures of how it can be used in the public space and to keep the conversation going, to start the conversation on the street about mobility data. And I think, yeah, just another examples. There you can see also a map where people can indicate something and some other questions, even on a bench that people can draw and add some things. Very easy to use, can be very creative, doesn't have to be that difficult. Here are some links to the websites of the things that I've been talking about. You know, of course, the website of Telram, but there's also Talks Telram, the platform, and I think that was my last slide. I think I talked a bit too long. Sorry for that.
Not at all. Elke, that was fantastic. I loved it.
Thank you.
Because it brought to life lots of those things, and also the link between the technologies that people can use, but also how to use them to make the most out of them, you know, and put them into either educational purposes or into where they can shape policy, or a bit of both, or really nice example. So thank you both very much for your presentation. You can see in the chat that's inspired lots of people to at least want to buy the equipment and have a go themselves. In fact, Pete Dyson, you seem to have used it quite a lot yourself anyway. So I think I think that's great. Everyone can get involved. You don't have to wait to belong to a project or anything like that, or you can. So it's quite an exciting time to be doing citizen science, I think. So thank you both very much for that. I think that's great. Any particular areas of questions on the chat there that you wanted to pick up on, or you're answering them as you go, Margarida? Did I see there really?
I tried to. It was just a quick question about if the Telrum can pick up speed, and it can for cars and vans, not for people, by the way, not for pedestrians, obviously. But that was really important and key in WeCount, because a lot of our participants were saying, we know our street is being used as a rat run. We know that people are speeding. We know that it's not safe for our children to walk by themselves to school because of car speeding, but we can't prove it. And once they collected the data via the Telrum, they then went to their local authorities with evidence saying, see, these are the times during the days where cars are speeding on my road. And then the argument is less so, because you can't argue with numbers when you collected that kind of evidence. So we felt that having that evidence, that solid evidence, not just the number of cars, but the speed at which they were traveling, was very empowering for some of our citizen scientists.
Yeah, excellent. And just shows again how it can inform policy or practice. But I guess there's still a little bit gap. I mean, how accepting are policymakers of these kind of citizen science approaches? Because again, there's got to be a mechanism, hasn't there, to turn this into change, I suppose, or to be part of the process towards change. Have you had any insights into that?
I think Elke can help me with this one if she wishes, but I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. It depends on the local authorities. Some are very open to these new ways of involving participants. Others are much more traditional in we hold the evidence and the knowledge, and we will decide which policies and so on. So I think our experience was a bit of a mixed bag, wouldn't you say so, Elke?
Yeah, correct. And it still is, and we still feel it everywhere, that some cities or local governments are very reluctant in seeing the citizens as a mobility experts.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So there's still work to be done on that behaviour change front, if you like. So the change in the way the local authorities see citizens' involvement somewhere along the line. Is that just comes from sort of attitudes of the local authorities? Does it a bit? Do you think that's what needs changing?
Yeah, go on, Elke.
Yeah, go ahead, Margarida. I was going to say.
I would say yes, but also there are some cultural differences between countries where we could feel that some countries are very traditional in their approach to policy making. Others are ahead in that spectrum of being more open to new ways of doing policy.
Really interesting, because there's a little bit of work to be done there then, isn't there?
Absolutely. There's a lot of work to be done there.
Not just a little bit.
Yeah.
David Marshall, you've got a question. David, I see you've just put your camera on. Do you want to ask it direct while you're there?
Yeah, I was wondering whether the additional costs, or whether that be in terms of equipment or volunteer time, or even the time it adds to the project, would it actually procure use by local authorities in scheme design?
Yeah.
At the moment, I've been recently retired from local government, and we've got some cycle schemes going on at the moment, which have actually had a lot of negative feedback. And considering we made efforts to consult as many people as we could, I'm just wondering how this might have improved that process.
Right. So within WeCount, we gave each citizen a sensor for free. So they didn't have to pay for the sensor. and any community venue or things like that that would want to take part would be given one for free as well. So schools had, for example, had access to sensors for free that they could then keep. So there are still sensors from WeCount from back in 2020 and 2021 that are still counting traffic. To pick up on something that she said in terms of the time investment, I think it's still a considerable time investment that needs from the participants, from the local authorities, and that I think ultimately can be a barrier, especially if we're trying to branch out and engage with citizens that usually don't traditionally engage and contribute to research projects. And that's why I wanted to highlight that point during my presentation, that it's important to financially compensate people for their time. We had citizens within WeCount that literally invested hours and hours of their spare time in not only setting up their own sensors, but also helping others within the community setting up their sensors, because it wasn't always a smooth project. And we're talking about a time where we couldn't physically go into people's houses and help them with the equipment. So we had what we called local champions, people within the community that were acting as facilitators and were helping others. And I think that needs to be recognized somehow, not just say, thank you very much to all our participants for your huge help. We could not have done it without you. It needs to go a step above. How, I don't know. We need more money. Basically, we need more investment. We need more recognition that this is important, that this is the way to go. We can't keep alienating people from this conversation. So yeah, I would say that there are still a lot of barriers there and a lot of work to be done in this area.
Quite inspiring, though.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Andy, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Sorry, my camera's not working, so I can't. You can't see me, but thanks both. Really, really interesting stuff. And there was a question. I can't quite work out what the question is, but there was something forming for me at the beginning, and then Elke, your examples I thought were really great at actually answering some of the things for me, particularly the cycling one. But the question that was going around my head during your presentations was, and I think Charles, you sort of touched on this as well when you were talking at the end there. It's about whose research counts. It's like you know, who. I'm wondering whether the term citizen science is very helpful, actually, because it sort of separates it. You know, there's citizen science, and then there's like the real academic stuff that counts.
Yeah.
And for me, I've just done some work actually where that question about, well, whose research really counts was a real big part of it, because there were people doing like, you know, just really great stuff, but in inverted commas spare time, and therefore it doesn't really count. And I just wonder, I thought the cycling thing was a really good example, actually, because that was, you know, I think as a cyclist, I can really relate to feeling unsafe in a particular, or having, you know, a beef with something, and I would just push that button. And, you know, to just record my own data, that felt very relatable and very relevant. And I think sometimes one of my challenges in the work that I do is framing things in a way that people will want to get involved. You know, it's like, why would I even want to spend my time doing this? Why is this relevant to my everyday life? And once people have made that that connection, then suddenly their expertise and their experience all comes into it, and they suddenly do get involved. But actually making that leap is a huge sorry, I'm asking about 15 questions here. But so I suppose the thing really is, how do we stop that separation between citizen science in inverted commas and, you know, fully funded academic stuff that gets written up and put into journals and you know, informed policy? And there's something about, for me, it's about bringing it together and not separating it. And it's just science. It's not citizen science. It's not academic science. It's just, we're just gathering data. And if I'm a cyclist, it counts. If I'm sat in an office, it counts. If it's yeah. I'll stop rambling.
I completely agree with you, Andy, by the way. I have a lot of mixed feelings about the terminology itself, calling it citizen science and calling people citizen scientists, because I agree it is just dividing. There was a really interesting academic paper that came out, I think, at the beginning of this year that talks exactly about that, if we should be calling it citizen science. And the authors, they argue that the words themselves are divisive. So not everyone sees themselves as a citizen, is a very formal word. And then scientists, people that are not highly educated, never had an interest in science, might not perceive themselves as proper scientists. So I completely agree. Whilst I completely agree, I don't have an answer of when I was reading that paper and the sort of alternatives that were proposing in terms of what should we call this body of work. They were not necessarily better. There was something about community research, which I don't know. I have my, again, mixed feelings about. I agree that if we call it something different, it will inevitably be something different and it will be perceived as second class or not as good. So there needs to be something must happen, either in the way we look at these things or the way we perceive what science is and how science is done. That needs to change. I think a lot of that needs to come from scientists themselves, and I'm a scientist, and I think I work with scientists every day, and I think there's still a bit of arrogance there, if I may say so myself, in thinking that the way we approach things, it's much more proper and scientific than anyone else could. And that's not often the case. We know through citizen science and other projects that we have worked on that with proper training, most people can collect data just as scientists would.
Yeah.
So that really doesn't answer your question. It just adds to how complex this issue is.
I think it's a really good point, Andy and Margarita. It makes me think as well, though, that sometimes when I'm working in policy and practice and trying to make a change, that scientists get that wrong as well. So like you said, we can be over theoretical or we can be over complex, and actually that doesn't help. So policymakers can refuse information from citizens, and they can refuse information from scientists as well, because neither are quite answering what they want. So it's about that involvement engagement, isn't it, right from the start of a project, getting them buy-in from the start and working together as partnerships. And again, I think we've tried to do that a little bit in the work we've done in Think, but it's really difficult because you've got to take off like all your baggage and then work together in a one big equal whole, and that doesn't suit where people have come from. But something needs to change, because it just doesn't quite work at the moment. We haven't done a great job with designing our transport systems in terms of sustainability and health, so something needs to change.
Maybe it's a stupid remark. We haven't had that issue with the word citizen science, as we also use in Dutch the word citizen science, because I don't like to use the word in Dutch, because then it's indeed, it comes to the same discussion, and we don't have the discussion about citizen science because it's not our language. Do you understand? So it's less a discussion here. We didn't have this discussion before, and it's a very relevant question. But then I thought, maybe you just need to use another language to describe for you citizen science, and then it's all solved.
Like we use Telram and we use the Dutch word. Yes, maybe.
No. Sorry, great. Also not an answer to your question. Sorry.
Go on, Elke.
Yeah, well, that's I also don't have an answer on the question. Sorry, so that was my suggestion. Just use another language.
I like it. So we're almost at time now, but I'll just bring in Pete Dyson for your question, because you've made some excellent comments, I think, in the chat. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, really good to see these trials, and I think the maybe address what I think is an elephant in the room, which is what happens when you hand over power. You might end up with responses that you didn't really like the sound of. I mean, that's a theme that we see in devolution of government. It's a theme that we see in lots of times when citizens' assemblies would be very similar. Set up citizens' assembly, they might not say things that you like. I think these trials are really great though, because they show that they quash some of those fears, and it would be see why policymakers might be overly concerned about the risk of handing over some power to people. But did you, out of interest, see people that were advocating for transport changes that say you, the researcher, didn't align with your own views of the science or the interpretation of the data?
I think it's a question to Margarida, because I'm not a scientist.
Well, I was the evaluator in the project, but thinking about WeCount, I only worked in WeCount, not the projects that Elke then described. I can't recall nothing too contagious. I can't recall anything that was problematic for us or for our research team. I think everything was either very aligned with our expectations or something that our scientists and researchers took on board quite easily. So, Elke, do you remember anything?
Well, maybe I can give an
Dramatic.
example of one of the school scouts outcomes that we have had. So with the child perspective on the school environment. So it was not really about that the children had some completely different analysis of the Telegram data, of course, but they were thinking about solutions that the adults in the environment would never think of, and those were really great solutions. And then the adults, the local municipality, jumped on it and used this solution that was presented by the children. So I think that's great as an example that these other perspectives are really great to include, and that a local municipality should not be afraid of having this non-scientist involved in or citizen scientist. Well, I don't say non-scientist. Well, you see everyone as a scientist, right? Or everyone as an expert. So to include these experts' view on solutions, it was really good for the municipality to see this, and also for all the other adults involved.
Just to add to that very briefly, when we did our wrapping up sessions, which we did for each case study, when we did the Cardiff one, the local team gave complete freedom to the participants to analyze the data and present it as they wished. So we had a session that was led by a father and young daughter, and they analyzed the data and presented. And it was a beautiful thing to see, because I think our researchers were quite unsure about this, giving out power and letting other people interpret and analyze the data, but they were also quite receptive to the way these people presented the data. So again, although I think it wouldn't have been how they, the scientists, would have presented the data, or the academic scientists, it was really well received by them. So hats off to our researchers who were a bit more open-minded. And I think, going back to what you said, Pete, I think it's about learning how to accept that you're going to be uncomfortable at some point with this process of letting go of power and letting other people make decisions, or make decisions with other people, rather than I'm the scientist, I'm in charge of this project, we must do as I say. There will be uncomfortable moments in that process, no doubt.
Great. Thank you very much. I mean, that just one last point I thought I'd make that I saw in the comments from Emma Bingham was just how impressive or how differently you can represent some of that data. So both like you're talking about, they're representing it in a bottom-up way. I was on yours, Elke, with the children presenting to the adults, which is really nice. But it also might be redisplaying the data visually differently, and that's something we've picked up in Think, in one of the projects that Amy and I are involved with, in collecting the way people use a public space walking, and then how do you represent that in a very everything from using very objective data about that space to more feelings and emotions about that space, so someone narrating their story in it, as well as visually showing it, or how much sensory data do you need data about what it sounds like in that space, all those different ways. And if you've got more citizens involved, I just think there's an opportunity there again in changing the power and changing how data is presented. So that's a nice way to show again, we don't need to present it in those boring old difficult graphs or charts. You can do it, or you might need a bit of that, but you can also do it in more novel and interesting ways. So that's really nice. So I think we have to leave it there. It's just gone 2 o'clock and we've run out of time. But what an interesting presentation from both of you that really talks to the stuff that we've been talking about a lot and think about, reducing or changing where the power lies in decision making, really, and allowing more involvement and engagement from people who are really experts about their own local communities in and how that can end up making a change for the better for people. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone for your questions as well. Just one final point. Amy, did you want to come on and say the last point? How's your camera and computer doing? If not, I can do it. I'll do it if you want. I mean, just the final point.
I think she's typing.
Sorry, yeah. Well, the problem, of course, is that Amy's left our project and I had to leave her a really high-tech computer behind and using a poor laptop. That's what happens, you see. So no, just to finish off, that as we've reached the final the first stage of Think, if you like, that's been funded, is that we're going to try, what we are doing at the moment, put together all of the stuff that we've learned during our time in Think, and as well as writing a book about that, as well as writing that for journal articles, we've also developed an online course, and I think we'll put that I'll put that in the chat now, a link to the course. So in the first instance, we've worked with our own institution at Aberystwyth University to develop an online distance learning version of the course that will take you through different elements of transport and health, but also about co-design and community work and things like that. And then there's an assessment to do at the end, and it's CPD accredited. But there is a cost associated with the course of I think it's £130 or something like that. It will run from October this year, and we'll see how that goes. But it might be that we can divide that course up or work it out in different ways for different groups if people are interested, tailor it to different people's needs over the next year or so, and we'll see how we go. So I'll just put that in the comments. But other than that, thank you very much everyone for your time, and thank you, Elke, Margarita. That was excellent, really interesting, and I've learned a lot, got a lot of things there. I think I'm off to buy my own equipment now to stick on my window and my bike, and we'll see how we go. So thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank you for having us,
my
Charles.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice remaining
Bye, everyone.
day. Bye.
Cheers everyone. Bye.